A single page in a logbook. One column of hours. One line of handwriting across the bottom. That line takes about 4 hours of dual to earn. Once it dries, the law lets a 140-hour pilot command 310 horsepower. Federal Aviation Regulation 61.3(1) attaches no minimum hours to it. None. An underwriter. Looking at the same pilot, the same airframe, and the same accident data wants 500 hours before writing a quote. For anything over 201 horsepower, 750 hours. 2 desks, 1 accident record, only one of them pays when it goes wrong. 10 airplanes close that gap the hard way, and this list works through every one of them. What was in your logbook the first time you flew something faster than the trainer? Put the number in the comments. That is what Sky Ranch covers. Subscribe so you catch the next one. These are the 10 least forgiving small airplanes for a pilot under 500 hours. Some bite on the pavement before the wheels ever leave it. Others wait until you are 200 feet up in a turn with nowhere to put it. Every airplane here has been on a shop floor. Several of them more than once. Number 1 is the only airplane in this fleet the FAA ever gated by law, and it took 16 fatal accidents in 8 years to get there. The countdown starts at 10. Grumman's AA-1 Yankee pulls in low-time pilots with a sliding canopy, a fighter roll rate, and a price that undercuts almost everything on the field. It looks like a Cessna 150 that grew up. It does not fly like one. The Yankee carries a laminar flow wing, an airfoil built for speed rather than lift at low airspeed. That wing builds drag fast when the nose comes up. Power comes off and the airplane stops gliding. It sinks. Numbers tell it better than adjectives. The Yankee stalls at 60 knots clean and 57 with full flaps. Where 55 knots works fine in the Cessna, the Yankee needs 74 on final. Drop below that and the sink rate arrives without warning. American Aviation redesigned that leading edge in 1971 for the AA-1A trainer. The original wing was already out the door on 459 airplanes. Through 1973, the Yankee posted a spin fatality rate 5 times higher than any aircraft then in production. NASA Langley bought the prototype, registration N501NA, in 1977 and flew it on stall research until 1987. Government engineers studied this wing for a decade. Owners flew it the whole time. Number 9 covers a category rather than one airframe. Tailwheel classics. The Luscombe 8, the Cessna 195, anything with the third wheel behind the mains and polished aluminum in the sun. Seduction here is real. Stick and rudder flying, the way it was done before the industry sanded the edges off. Danger does not wait until you are airborne. It lives on the runway. A tailwheel airplane carries its center of gravity behind the main gear. Touch down with any drift, and that mass wants to swap ends. The wheels create friction pulling one way, while the weight behind them swings the other. It happens in under a second. Researchers: Alex de Vugt at Drew University and Kayla Lotero at Fairleigh TID. Dickinson pulled 134 nose-over accidents from the NTSB database and published the breakdown in 2024. Nose-overs account for roughly 12% of every general aviation accident on record. Tailwheel aircraft made up 58% of that group. Narrow it to accidents where the NTSB coded nose-over as the defining event, and the tailwheel share climbs to 82%. Regulation: 61.31 requires a tailwheel endorsement. It sets no minimum hours for that either. The airplane is fine. Pavement is where it gets you. Number 8, the Mooney M20 series sells one of the best value propositions in general aviation. Cruise at 160 knots on the fuel burn of a trainer in an airframe you can park in a T hangar. That efficiency is the trap. A slippery airframe does not want to slow down. Arrive 20 knots hot and the Mooney floats past thousands of feet of runway. The rookie correction is to push it onto the pavement. The nose touches, the gear compresses, and the airplane starts porpoising down the centerline like a skipped stone. Mooney's own operating manual is blunt about it. The airplane must never touch down in a nose-low attitude or at too high an airspead. AOPA's Air Safety Foundation ran a full review in 1995, funded by the M.J. Murdoch Charitable Trust, weighing 392 Mooney mishaps against 2,450 accidents across every other retractable single in the class. Energy management is the entire airplane. 3 airplanes down and everyone bites on the pavement. The next 3 take it into the air. Number 7 is the Cirrus SR-22, and this one earns its place for a reason nobody expects. The pitch is genuinely excellent. 310 horsepower from a Continental IO 550, glass panel, side stick, and a rocket-deployed parachute over your head. The Cirrus airframe parachute system has logged 148 documented saves and 297 survivors as of May 2026. Those are not marketing figures. Those people walked away. That parachute has an envelope, and the envelope has a flaw. CAPS needs roughly 500 feet above the ground to open in level flight. Out of a single turn spin, 920 feet. Early SR-22's cap deployment speed around 133 to 140 knots. Now picture the traffic pattern. A low-time owner turns final at 400 feet, eyes moving between synthetic vision and the moving map, chasing the magenta line instead of the airspeed tape. The wing loads up in the turn and lets go. The handle is right there. Altitude is not. Most fatal Cirrus accidents happen in the pattern or the initial climb, exactly where the chute cannot reach. Cirrus built the CSIP instructor program around this problem, and most pilots need 15 to 25 hours of transition before they are ahead of the airplane. Automation does not lower the stall speed. Number 6 is the Beechcraft V-Tail Bonanza, the most studied light airplane in American history. Ralph Harmon drew it in 1945. 2 ruddervators instead of 3 surfaces, retractable gear, and speed that embarrassed airplanes, costing 3 times as much. For 35 years, it was the airplane a successful person bought. That V-tail carries a narrow center of gravity envelope and a pitch coupling that makes over-control easy. A pilot loses the horizon in cloud, corrects by feel, and the airplane slides into a spiral dive almost unnoticed. Airspeed passes 200 knots in seconds. At that speed, the tail carries loads well past what the structure was built to take. Between 1947 and 1984, Bonanzas recorded 232 in-flight structural failures. More than 500 people were aboard those airplanes. Beech spent 4 decades saying the same thing. Pilots were flying outside the envelope. In 1987, the FAA and the Department of Transportation put the airframe through wind tunnel and flight testing. The V-tail did not meet type certification standards in one corner of its envelope. That 1987 finding is the part that still does not sit right. 4 decades of blaming the left seat, settled by a wind tunnel in a single season. Airworthiness. Directive 94-20-04 mandated a reinforcing cuff at the stabilizer leading edge and repetitive bulkhead inspections. After the cuff went on, in-flight breakups dropped off a cliff and stayed there. Beech said pilot error for 40 years. The wind tunnel said certification standards. Which one would you have believed at the time? Number 5 is not one airplane but the light piston twin. The Baron, the Aerostar, the Twin Comanche. 2 engines, redundancy, and the promise that a failure over hostile ground is survivable. That second engine changes the arithmetic, and not the way the brochure implies. Below minimum control speed with one engine feathered, a light twin rolls toward the failed side and keeps rolling. On a warm day near gross weight, most of these airplanes barely climb at all on one engine. The NTSB studied twin crashes from 1972 through 1976. An engine failure accident in a twin proved 4 times more likely to be fatal than the same event in a single. Modern reviews of Lycoming and Continental data put that multiplier at 2. Most of them simply fail to climb. Trees, fences, terrain. 2 engines look like insurance until one of them stops. The last 4 airplanes forced the paperwork to change. Number 4 is the Piper Tomahawk, and the paperwork on this airplane is worse than its nickname. Piper built it in the late 1970s to take the training market from Cessna. Roomy cabin, wraparound visibility, a modern T-tail. Students liked it immediately. Approaching the stall, the Tomahawk's tail oil cans, a metallic shudder that reads as something breaking. A student freezes for 1 second. The wing drops as much as 90 degrees, and the airplane departs. The FAA certified it for intentional spins to the same standard as every other trainer of that era. Then Piper modified the wing. According to the NTSB, that modified wing never went back through certification stall testing. Piper added 2 more stall strips in 1979. An airworthiness directive in 1983 forced the retrofit onto the whole fleet. NTSB investigators wrote in 1997 that the strips may not have solved the problem, citing test pilots who reported wing drop in both configurations. Rates. Tell the rest. NTSB analysis for from 1984 to 1994 placed the Tomahawk's fatal stall and spin rate at 3.4 to 5.6 times the Cessna. 150 and 152. Chairman Jim Hall put that in writing to acting FAA administrator Barry Valentine on July 10, 1997. Piper issued a revised handbook with new stall altitude guidance in May 2012, answering a recommendation from 1997. In one British fatal spin accident, that revision reached the flying school the month after the crash. 15 years between a recommendation and a page. Piper changed that wing and never put it back on the test schedule. The last 3 airplanes raise a harder version of the same question. Number 3 is the Lancair 4, the sharpest example of what happens when regulation steps back entirely. A Lancair 4 cruises with a Second World War fighter and costs a fraction of a factory single. Builders get exactly the airplane they want, because the experimental amateur build category lets them set their own numbers, including the weights. The CAFE Foundation flight tested a Lancair 4 in May 1999 and measured a 66-knot stall. That is not extreme on paper. It becomes extreme the moment the engine quits, because the airplane arrives at every emergency landing site faster than the site can absorb. NTSB records hold 66 Lancair 4 accidents. 35 were fatal. That is a 53% fatality rate against a registered fleet of 353 airplanes. Lancairs make up just over 3% of the amateur-built fleet and more than 10% of its fatal accidents. These accidents happen in clear weather. Stall and spin almost every time. Investigators studied 224 experimental accidents and released the results in 2012. 2 windows dominate. Early in the airframe's life and the first hours flown by a new owner who did not build it. Micron's chief executive Steve Appleton had thousands of hours and an aerobatic background. The airplane he went down in was a modified IVPT. This category assumes the pilot knows what he bought. Many of them do not. Number 2 is any retractable single. The Piper Arrow, the Cessna 210, the Comanche. Seduction is simple. 15 knots for the price of a lever. The catch is a bill that arrives in half a second. A propeller touches pavement. Nobody is hurt. Blades cost a few thousand. Then the shock travels down the crankshaft, and under Lycoming's definition, the engine comes off the airplane and gets taken apart for inspection. Lycoming counts a gear collapse on a parked airplane as a prop strike. A hangar door counts too. Global Aerospace, one of the largest aviation insurers, prices that teardown on a 4-cylinder Cessna 172 engine at about $27,000, all in. In 2007, a California engine shop quoted the same job at roughly $4,000. Shops find real internal damage in only 10 to 20% of the engines they open. The other 80% pay $27,000 to be told the engine was fine. Gear-up landings remain among the most common claims underwriters pay. That is precisely why they want 500 hours and 100 hours of retractable time before they quote you. Number 1 is the Mitsubishi MU-2, the only airplane on this list the federal government gated by law. On paper, it is a bargain no other turboprop touches. 300 knots, 6 seats, pressurized, at a price that undercuts every King Air on the market. Roll control comes from spoilerons, not ailerons. Panels rise out of the wing instead of hinging at the trailing edge. That lets the wing carry full-span flaps, and it is crisp at speed. As airspeed decays, especially after an engine failure, the spoilerons lose authority. Below minimum control speed, the airplane rolls toward the failed engine at more than 30 degrees per second. In the early 1990s, the MU-2 ran 6.62 accidents per 100,000 flight hours. Worst record of any turboprop twin flying. Between 1975 and 1994 alone, the type recorded 119 accidents and 257 fatalities. A sitting congressman asked the agency to ground the fleet. Then the FAA ran a full certification review and found nothing wrong with the airframe or the design. So SFAR 108 changed nothing about the airplane. Published in the Federal Register on February 6, 2008, it took effect a year later. It mandated model-specific initial training, annual recurrent checks, the manufacturer's standardized checklist, and a working autopilot for nearly all single-pilot operations. The fatal accident rate fell by more than half. In Europe, where that training was always required, the MU-2's record already matched the King Air. That result is the most useful number in this entire video, and almost nobody in general aviation quotes it. The pattern across all 10 is not what the titles suggest. Piper's Trainer carries an overall accident rate 1/3 lower than the Cessna 150 and 152. AOPA's retractable study found the Bonanza slightly safer than its peers, with pilot error cited in 73% of V-tail crashes and 83% of straight-tail crashes. FAA engineers found no design flaw in the MU-2 at all. None of these airplanes is trying to hurt anyone. They punish inexperience, and they do it faster than instinct catches up. The FAA's own safety material states that the first 50 to 100 hours in a new type are the dangerous ones, not the first 50 hours of your flying life, the first 50 in that airframe, which means the window resets every time you buy. One airplane in this fleet got that gap closed, and it took a special federal regulation to do it. The other 9 sit behind a signature that takes 4 hours. Once you see the difference between what the FAA permits and what the underwriter prices, you cannot stop seeing it on every ramp in the country. Subscribe to Sky Ranch and you will catch the next one before it costs you.